My name is Robert Farlow, also known as the Stone Sailor. I have a podcast called The Stone Sailor, where I advocate for cannabis reform and cannabis for veterans. And I'll get to that, how that came about. I'll let you know, but it'll all come together later in the story. I was born in South Philadelphia. My father was about 19 years older than my mother, and he had already had a family, a wife and 3 kids, and he was a lot older, and he was involved in the underworld. He never really held a legitimate job. He was a gambler. He dealt drugs. He pimped women, scams, pool, hustled people for pool, whatever. I mean, he was just a hustler. He never worked a legitimate job in his life. He met my mother at a restaurant. My mother was a waitress, and he hooked up with my mother. And, my mother was young. She was 19. And this guy was a lot older and more experienced and promised her the world, And she eventually got pregnant with my sister and then me. I was born originally in South Philadelphia. Throughout my life, I grew up in South Philadelphia and South Florida. I spent half my time growing up. My father committed a murder. He killed someone, and when I was about 6 years old and 5 years old, and they retaliated against us and burnt our house down, and my sister died in that fire. Her name was Tara. So that was the earliest memory I had, of my first, someone that used to be there and help, change me and do things, and then all of a sudden this person is gone out of my life. From there, my father went to prison. He got sentenced to life, and I used to go visit my father. His girlfriend, a lady that he was having an affair on with my mother while he was married to my mother, she eventually married him and stayed with him while he was in prison. But throughout my life, then my mother ended up dating another guy who was a big-time drug dealer. And this was in South Philly. He was he knew how to make meth with a chemical called P2P. And he used to make it in our garage. He married my mother, and then they gave me the greatest gift. They gave me a little brother named Mark, because my sister was gone. So now it was like really cool. I had somebody that, I could play with and that I could help protect, because my sister wasn't around and I already lost her. So I figured I had an obligation and a duty as a bigger brother to protect my brother Mark. Just like my father, my stepfather, they were very violent. I saw domestic violence. I saw my mother get hit and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I couldn't stop it because I wasn't strong enough. I physically, I wasn't. And I just remembered that I had to, I was looking for a way to get stronger and be more physical so I could protect my mom who was being abused. So I found wrestling. And the first time I got involved in the wrestling, I got my ass beat my freshman year, and, I got just pinned and just abused, like everyone did. But I kept going back, and eventually I got really good. And I learned how to eat, and I learned how to do pull-ups and sit-ups and calisthenics and running and all the stuff that made you a successful wrestler, the training. And, from that point, I started studying martial arts like judo and jiu-jitsu, all originally with the idea of basically protecting my mom and my brother from either my dad or my stepdad, who my stepfather eventually went to prison. And my mom just is a great woman. She's still alive. She's the love of my life, my mother, but she made very poor choices in the men that she used to bring around us. And she'll admit that till today. I mean, there were some times in our house, because of the way, the lifestyle that, that we lived, there would be a lot of money because things would be going good illegally. In other words, he was selling drugs and whatever, and then all of a sudden the cops would come in and take everything, and we would end up having to live in a trailer with my grandmother in South Florida. So this was my upbringing. My whole life, my father was like, he didn't like the cops. He would always teach me things about like how to hide stuff. Like, it was funny because my brother and I, even with my stepdad, we would go on like these treasure hunts in the house, and we would find money and drugs and all kinds of shit in the house. Like, he would put it inside our video games, and we would see that the screws were all worn. And my brother and I would get a butter knife, and we'd see, like, you know, powder would come out of it. And we never touched it or anything. We never, you know, we would just put it back, you know. But I remember seeing that as a kid. I remember seeing my stepfather shoot heroin on a toilet one time. He was passed out with a needle in his arm, you know, and I remember seeing that. And I remember just saying, kids would tease me my whole time, your father's a jailbird. They were talking about my father, my father who went to jail for murder and was in the newspaper and all this stuff. So all the kids in the neighborhood, they weren't allowed to play with me because they thought, hey, if you send your kid to go play with Robert, then your kid might end up getting hurt because Robert had his house burnt down because his dad's a bad guy. And then Robert got a stepfather, and the cops were always raiding for drug raids and you know, confiscating shit. And it was just really hard to keep a friend. So my brother and I were really close. So it was kind of like me and him against the fucking world, you know? And as time grew on, I started wrestling and getting better. I started acting out a little bit when I was 16, 15. I got arrested for fighting, shoplifting, and eventually I remember one time just thinking to myself, there were people in my life that always would tell me, like a lot of the school teachers, they knew that my father was in prison for murder. You know, some way my mom would tell them in like some kind of parent conference or whatever. They just basically would call me a scumbag and say I was going to end up in jail anyway, just like him. So I would just act out and be like, okay, fine, yeah, I'm going to be a scumbag like him, and you say I'm going to be just like him, so I'm just going to act like him. So I wasn't a juvenile delinquent, but I got arrested a couple times as a minor before I started figuring things out on my own. And I remember, you know, just like I said, getting into wrestling, martial arts, and concentrating on that. Was very, and going to the police athletic league and learning how to box. Like, I was always into that kind of stuff because I wanted to protect my mother and my brother. That was my whole reason to get into martial arts and stuff like that. It was to protect my mom and my brother. That was the catalyst that got me into all that. And I got quite good at it, you know, and I won a couple big tournaments, and people started seeing, you know, wow, he's really good. He could defend himself. And I built up a little reputation, and you know, at that point, you know, people would know not to mess around with me because they saw that I would, you know, win all these matches in wrestling, and that I would take on all these guys, and that I was lifting weights, and I was getting stronger physically. And really all what it was just to protect my mother and my brother. That was the only reason I got into that stuff. So, but I'm glad I did, because it paid off in dividends later. You know, learning how to stay in shape and be physically fit is very important. So from there, I said to myself, after I got arrested for the last time, I just said, listen, I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to be like my stepfather. I don't want to go to prison. I visited prison. I used to go to the visiting room to see my father in Trenton State Prison, and that's where I got to meet. That's where they had Reuben Hurricane Carter, and my father was in the same prison with Reuben Carter and knew Reuben Carter really well, the Hurricane. Denzel Washington did the movie about him, and he put my father in his book, The 16th Round, because he was close with my father, and they remained close until later on in life. You know, when Reuben got out, he went to Canada and he ended up dying of prostate cancer, but my father and him were really close, and which was a pretty cool thing to know him. But I grew up going to visiting rooms, being that kid that would play, you know, the Connect Four in the prison, seeing my dad or my stepdad in Danbury Federal Prison, or my dad in Trenton State Prison. I had two dads that were both in prison, you know, and everybody knew it, and they made fun of us and everything for it. Your dad's a jailbird. You're a scumbag. I mean, everything you could think of. And but when I got tough physically, they didn't make fun of me as much anymore. They might have behind my back said it, but they never said it to my face anymore. Once I learned, you know, how to use my hands and learn how to fight, how to defend myself, or how to beat someone's ass if they're just talking shit about me. You know what I mean? And I started, you know, walking, instead of with my head down, my head up high. You know, my head was down because of who my father was, but through the wrestling and being successful, my head started to lift up, and I started actually getting some confidence in myself, which was good because my self-confidence was really bad because I had everyone around me telling me that I was going to be like my dad, including some members of my family, unfortunately. So, you know, like I said, growing up, I lived in trailer parks. I lived in South Philly. I lived in I lived in a nice home, and then I lived in a not so nice home. Our lifestyle was feast or famine, you know. But my mom always tried to, you know, my mom always put a roof, and she always put food on the table. Unfortunately, she had to attach herself to men that weren't, you know, the best for her in her life. So with all that, I said, well, where can I always had this affinity to travel. As a young man, I would spin the globe, and I would just, you know, point at a country with my finger. And I would look at the country and I would say, okay, that's Mongolia. I wonder how the people are. I wonder, you know, I wonder what they do on Saturdays. Do they go to the movies? What's in their refrigerator? You know, I wanted to peek inside. What do they eat? How do they pray? What's their language? What do the women look like? You know, I was always fascinated with that kind of stuff. And I would read books about like Magellan and Columbus and how they traveled and all the different, you know, indigenous people they met. And I just had this travel bug, you know, about, wow, I would have been awesome just to be like a sailor back then, to just sail and go to all these, you know, uncharted islands and just like see all the nature there, the new species there. I just loved it. So I would spin that globe and I would just keep pointing in places. One day I'm going to go there. One day I'm going to go there, and I'm going to meet people, and I'm going to meet and see how they are and how they live and all that. And that just always fascinated me. So when I got ready to graduate high school, I wasn't a great student, okay, but I was physically fit, and I said, you know what, I want to travel. You know, with a 1.9 GPA, there wasn't any colleges knocking down my door to get Rob Farlow. And no matter how good of a wrestler I was, no college wants a dummy. They can't even get a 2.0, and that was me, basically. So I decided, I said, where else can I travel, see the world, but in the Navy? I saw a commercial. I said, wow, this could be a great opportunity. Plus, you know, everyone's saying I'm going to go to prison. So if I go in the Navy, maybe, you know, I could restore honor and dignity to my last name. Maybe I'll be able to go back to the neighborhood and walk with my chest out and my head held up high. You know, that I did something that you know, my father didn't do. And you know, because I had a grandfather in the military, but that was it. My father wasn't in the military. He didn't, you know, the Vietnam thing, he dodged that. He was happy to tell you he dodged all that stuff. So I said, you know what, let me go in the military. This is something that'll give me discipline, because I think, you know, the more discipline you have, discipline equals success. You know, the more discipline in life that you can have, the more successful. That's just a fact. Discipline equals success. And I said, where else can I get this discipline? My mom, she's a single parent. My brother was okay at the time. I got him into wrestling. I thought he was on the right track. He was a couple years behind me, and I just told him, hey, I gotta leave, buddy. I told my mom, I gotta leave, I gotta go. You know, this is a journey, I have to do it. I just felt like something was waiting for me out there. I just felt like there was this whole world, and I just couldn't wait anymore to see it. I just had to go. And I went into the Navy, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And when I was in the Navy, I eventually, after my first couple years, I decided to change jobs, because originally they had me as an aircraft mechanic, similar to an aircraft mechanic, but I worked on like catapults and arresting gear and things like that. I wasn't very good at that, but I was very good at like personal, as far as, you know, wearing a clean uniform, showing up on time, being professional. Hell, if they just would have had me clean toilets, I would have been proud to do it. But up in the upper chain of command, they recognized that I was, you know, I always had a clean uniform, and I was always talking. I'm very chatty. I talk with people. And they said, I think we got a great fit for you, Farlow. We're going to put you in this little office here called Fleet Information. And you're going to like basically run like an airline. You're going to book Space A flights. You're going to have parts come in, and you're going to be dealing with people. And my chief told me, wherever he is, his name was Chief Yager, Victor Yager, wherever he is, He was a good man. He rode my ass hard. Rode my ass hard. I mean, he did. But he said, I really think this would be a good fit for you. And I went to this office, and I was a young junior ranking guy, and I ended up flourishing in the office. Everybody loved me. They would call and they would give compliments on me. And, you know, oh, this guy's great. You come, he's helpful, he talks to you. Because I'm like, I'm from Philly. I want to, you know, I guess it's from just being a Philly guy. I just like to talk to everybody, find out their story. So as people would come and they would want to get flights, and I would deal with military and civilian retirees on these flights. And, you know, I would get them on flights to go places like Greece and all these other places, and Turkey. I would send them all over, like on like little vacations, you know, because I had the inside track on all the flights that were coming. And if there's extra room, you could take somebody for a vacation. And I knew what was coming out beforehand, so they knew that. So everybody, you know, I knew everybody knew me, you know, because I worked in a pretty good spot. You know, I had a lot of juice, a lot of stroke at that spot, and I shined there. I shined. And I remember, oh, and I was stationed in Italy, by the way. I joined the Navy, went through basic training, did all that stuff, and next thing you know, I ended up getting stationed out in Sicily, Sigonilla, Sicily. And it was awesome. It was just like, I mean, I remember just walking around and like all the ancient Roman ruins and the Greek amphitheaters and all these beautiful cities like Taormina. And I was just a young kid, and I was the beautiful women, and I would go to these nightclubs like up in the mountains by volcanoes, like me and my friends at work that were in the Navy at this base. And I have friends that I met people that I still talk to today. And I was there, and I had this great little job, and I was hooking people up, and I was traveling, and it was just really good times. And this was before 9/11. This was before terrorism came into play, and everything had to be, you know, it was a lot less, you know, scrutiny, you know, for security. It was a lot easier to move, you know. So from that point, my enlistment came up, and they said to me, we think you would be a great fit, that same chief. He says, I think you'd be a great fit as a Master at Arms, which is a military policeman. In the Navy, we have Master at Arms, MAs. The MAs are the military policemen. So my chief once again said, I think you'd be a great fit. I didn't want to re-enlist in my current rate because that meant that I would have to leave my job that I was currently doing and actually go work on aircrafts and stuff, which I didn't want to do. But so he said, I think you would be great as a MA, a military policeman. You're very personable. You're the type of dude that we need. We don't need some MA, young junior, you know, E4 mouthing off to an O4, an officer. You know, that's, you know, you got to be very respectful as a military policeman because you deal with high-ranking officers and high-ranking senior enlisted NCOs. So you gotta have tact. You gotta have tact, and I pride myself on that. And so from that point, I got recommended, and then all of a sudden I went to the military police school in Lackland Air Force Base. And while I was at Lackland Air Force Base and I'm going through the police academy, I was like, literally everything they taught as far as searching techniques and seizure and all that stuff. Like, I've seen the cops arrest my dad like 30 times in the house. I've been there when our houses were raided. I watched how the cops searched. I watched how they did everything. My father would teach me how to hide stuff. We'd watch him. And when I got there, like, it was just natural to me. Like they would set up these scenarios where they would hide drugs in a room and have two people with an argument, and you arrive, but like, you know, one of the guy's got a gun in his pocket, but there's drugs, and like, these are scenarios that they actually get actors to play. And immediately I would walk in and I'd be like, oh, he's got a bulge in his pocket, he's got a gun, you know, I bet you the drugs are in the drawer, I see the spoon. You know, they would leave these clues, but I was able to pick up on them. The other kids weren't, because they were squares. A lot of them were squares. They'd never been around that. So I was able to pick up on that. So they were looking at me like, oh my God, this guy's like Jesus Christ. You know, next thing I know, I'm the honor graduate. I'm the distinguished honor graduate. I'm #1 in a class of 50. And I'm like, I couldn't freaking believe it, you know? And they were telling me, you know, you're the best damn cop to come through here, and I got letters of commendation from high-ranking officers with medals ribbons like this. And for the first time in my life, I had these important people telling me that I was actually like good at something and that I wasn't in trouble. You know what I mean? And it was like really shocking at first because I was like, I'm waiting for like Ashton Kutcher to like come out and be like, you're punked. But it wasn't. It wasn't a joke. They were for real. And I got all these letters of commendation. They took pictures with me at the end of the graduation. They had me give a speech because I was the honor graduate. This shit never happened to me. This has never happened to me before. This is like, I'm waiting for someone to just tell me, all right, it's a joke. We found out who you are. We found out that your dad's a dirtbag, your stepdad's a dirtbag, your cousin's in prison for drug trafficking, so you must be a dirtbag too, and maybe, you know, you got through the system, maybe you squeaked by. So like, I'm waiting for them to tell me something like that. Now, full disclosure, everything about my family was fully disclosed on the background when you go into the military. You might have told them everything. My father was this, my father was that. So I didn't, you know, there wasn't any surprises. When I had to upgrade my clearance to become a military policeman, all that stuff had to come out. And I put it all down. And I was thinking, well, you know, maybe they reconsidered, they read it, maybe they finally got around to reading it and they reconsidered and they want to get me out. But it was funny. So as I graduated, and the commanding officer, she was a lady, a very nice lady. I think she was a commander, an 05 in the Navy. And she came to me and she said, well, since you're our honor graduate, you get to choose a specialty. You can go to a specialty school, or if you want to choose your orders, you can go anywhere you want. So I'm like, wow, I could choose a specialty? And I'm like, well, what do you have? And she's like, well, we have canine, working canine. We have personal protection, where you'll bodyguard, like be a bodyguard for an admiral, where I'd wear a suit, admiral, secretary of the Navy, I'm the bodyguard, I drive their car, I get them coffee, whatever it is. I'm their private fucking security. They had an investigation school, and I said, dogs, canines, that sounds interesting. And she said, do you want to go watch a demo? They do demos all the time across the street. And I said, yeah, I'd love to watch a police dog canine demo. So she had someone take me there the next day, and I went out to this field and I took a seat with everyone else, and I saw this army soldier walking out in camouflage fatigues, and they were pressed, they were creased so sharp that you would cut your hands on them. And he's marching out there with this beautiful 95-pound German Shepherd right at the heel. And he marches out there with the dog. He's going left-facing movements, right-facing movements, reverse, and the dog's just staying right there on his hip. Out in the field, there's a guy wearing a big bite suit, like a Gumby suit. And I remember he sent the dog, he told him, get him. And this dog ran, chased this guy down, jumped on him, bit him on the arm, tackled the guy down. The handler ran over, the dog was biting the dog, and the handler just said, out, and the dog just went, heel, and the dog came right here. Complete psychopath killer to obedient dog, just like that. Just with the word out, heel. Brought him right back. And I was like, oh my God. And I looked at it, and everyone applauded, and I looked at it and I said, that's me. That's my life. That's what I want to do. And went back to the office and I told her, ma'am, this is what I want to do. And 2 weeks later, I was in canine school. While I was in canine school at Lackland, I learned a lot about animal behavior, but animal behavior is really human behavior. And I started putting things together in my head as far as how to communicate. If this works, you know, with animals, positive reinforcement, negative punishment, things like that. Stuff that I didn't really get. I got a lot of negative punishment, but I didn't get much positive reinforcement. So I started realizing, you know, what the fuck was going on in my head and why I felt the way I did. I always felt like I had to hold my head down, or that I was inferior to someone because my father wasn't a doctor, a lawyer, or even a, like, you know, works in a, you know, a store or something. You know, my dad was in prison, you know, and I understood what happened, and I started learning how the principles of conditioning of dogs and how we're conditioned and you know, all that stuff. And learned a lot about myself. It was very introspective, and that's considered the hardest portion of the class, to get through the animal behavioral portion. Most guys, if they wash out from that class, they wash from the psychological portion, the animal psychology. And I found it so cathartic just to learn, oh, wow, it's the same thing with human beings, They get rewarded if you do this, you don't give a reward if you do that. Sometimes there's a negative consequence for it, sometimes there's not. I learned all these things, and it was an amazing time for me. And I was going through that. First, when you get there, instead of a dog, they give you a bucket, and you got to put a leash on it, and you got to drag the bucket when you walk. You got to praise the bucket. That's a good boy. That's a good girl. No, you got to say a correction. So you're talking to a bucket out in the middle of the field, and all these people are driving by, and you have handlers out there with buckets on leashes, 6-foot leashes, yelling at the dog, shouting commands: stay, sit, down, heel. Good buddy, good girl, and you're praising this bucket, and you feel like an idiot, right? And everybody laughs at you, but it's all part of the first week or so before you even touch a dog. They got you out there in buckets, and it was really just an awesome class, and it was 12 weeks long. And I learned a lot about training dogs, animals. I learned a lot about human beings and what makes us tick, and I thought it was fascinating. So I graduate there at canine school, and fast forward, I'm in the Navy several years. I'm a military police canine handler. I've worked bomb detection dogs, drug detection dogs. I've found bombs. I've found drugs, ammunition, all kinds of stuff as a military policeman. Then all of a sudden, this thing happened called the Iraq War, which was March 2003. I remember watching the Iraq War on television while I was stationed in Japan. I was married at the time, and I was watching it, and I remember saying to myself, oh my God, this is driving me nuts. I can't just sit here on the couch and watch this thing go down anymore. This was around 2004, about a year after the war started. I'm watching soldiers getting blown up by improvised explosive devices. Well, I had the ability to work a dog to detect those IEDs. That was my job, counter IED. And I'm thinking, I'm here in the Navy, and I got Army and Marine brothers over there that are finding bombs, and they're being burnt out because of the deployment. And I felt just like, I gotta do something about this. I have this skill. I need to be over there finding these bombs and helping saving our guys. And next thing I know, I remember maybe a month later, there was an all-wide message. They call them a message. Basically, it's an email that goes out from the Department of Defense, and it goes to all the services. And it said, we need dog handlers from the Air Force and the Navy, because our Army dog handlers and our Marine Corps dog handlers are stretched thin. The guys are getting out because they just don't want to be redeployed again and again and again. Here we are, the war's been going on about 18 months. So when this message came out, I remember I showed up to the kennel. I was stationed in Japan, and we had about 6 handlers at the time. I was 7. And I remember showing up, and everybody was sitting there, and it was like this meeting we had. And our chief came, and he told us about, they had a tasking, which means we've been assigned something. And everybody was standing there, and everybody at this time in the kennel had a wife and kids. There was no single people. I was married, but I had no children. And I said, what's going on? And we had this kennel meeting, and my chief said, listen, we got to send a dog and a handler, a team, to Iraq for 7 months to be embedded with the Army in combat. We're Navy military police. We're squids. We're trained on shipboard, tying knots, firefighting on ships. We're trained as cops because we went through the police academy. We're trained as dog handlers. We're not trained as combat soldiers. Navy. Okay, we're not Navy SEALs, all right? We're dog handlers. And I remember immediately when he said that, there were several guys in there that were like, no, 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 I don't. I got kids, please, I don't want to go. And I remember just saying, send me, I'll go. Because I was just thinking about this a month earlier. I was watching CNN or one of those shows, and I'm watching these IEDs wreak havoc on our men and women over there. And I said, I just can't sit on this couch and watch this anymore. I got to get into this. I can contribute to this. And all of a sudden, a month later, it was like manifestation. Here it was. This was my opportunity. So I said, send me. And my chief was like, wow, thank you for making this easy, because I was afraid I would have to order someone to go. And God forbid they don't come back. I would feel terrible. But you volunteered, so I appreciate that. So there I was. I was tagged. This was around late 2004. A lot of things were going on. It was really bad. They just met. There was just a young guy over there. I remember they cut his head off. They did a video of it. I remember calling my mom and telling her, look, I'm going to Iraq. And she was like, are you kidding me? They're going to, you know, and, you know, it was pretty stressful for her. Remember, she lost her daughter, my sister. My brother was still at home. He was with my mom. I was in Japan, married, in the Navy, making a career out of it because I loved it. And I remember them saying, before you go to combat, you got to go through a 2-week course in El Paso, Texas. It's called the CRC course. It's for Navy personnel that are going to deploy into combat. It's a combat readiness course, and it's taught by the Army. And you go through it with your dog. You don't just go through it, you go through it with your dog. So I remember going through all the training where we went there, and they got Army drill sergeants, and I'm teaching my dog how to low crawl, and I got my dog with me low crawling under the barbed wire, or wire, not barbed wire, but under the wire, and they're shooting mock rounds over us, you know, and I got my dog down and I'm crawling, I'm teaching him how to go through. So if we have to crawl, then I'm running and shooting with the dog with my M16 at the heel and my leash tied to my vest, and I'm hitting targets while moving, putting the dog down, putting the dog to the heel, you know, standing up, kneeling, shooting, doing all these things, getting ready for my mission. Because our mission now, was trained for law enforcement, now I'm training for combat as a Navy guy. And they had Army drill sergeants, and they had their little funny hats, and they were, you know, calling us squids and all kinds of stuff. But I had my dog with me, and we had to do the whole course with our dog. We had to, you know, they would send us out in the middle of the field in Texas, and we would have to use land navigation to find our way back. So I would get lost out there with my dog, and we would, like, you know, learning how to read a map and all that stuff. So it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of good training that would, to put in my toolbox, that it would eventually keep me alive when I did get into combat. And then from there, I deployed to Iraq. I deployed to Baghdad, and I got attached to the 3rd Infantry 7th Regiment, 2005. And it changed my life forever, that deployment. You know, Route Irish, IED Alley, all these things that Iraq veterans know those words. I had to go out there and look for IEDs and bombs. Just me and my dog. They would put 2 security guys with me because there was a price on our head. There was a price on my dog's head from the insurgents. They were paying $100,000 if you killed a dog, because they knew the dogs would find the bombs. And just going out there and knowing that a sniper's looking to take you out, take the dog out, being shot at all the time, finding explosives, you know, raiding houses, kicking doors in. You know, I'd never done anything like that before. 2-3 months into this deployment, I was already a hardened, seasoned veteran, combat veteran. I looked at myself in the mirror, I remember one time, about a month or a month and a half into it. I came back from the mission, and I just saw I had all smoke on my face and everything. I just knew that I changed as a human being after what I just saw and did. You know, you know, we were securing voting places for them because they were going to have their first national election. These voting sites, we would have to go out there, set up a perimeter, search everything with the dogs, and, you know, so the people can come in and vote. It was just very chaotic. very chaotic. I was shot at on a regular basis. We were mortared on a regular basis. I lost a friend, 2 friends. We lost a fellow dog handler and a dog. I mean, it was really bad. You know, guys in my unit, we had several casualties. And these were Army guys that I just banded with when I got over there. And we had several casualties. One guy I got close with, he got killed. You know, and we would go out to this, at night, we would go out to this area. It was like a smoking area. And people, you would have missions round the clock, you know, and they would bring us out to sniff, do this, search for bombs here, there. And they used us a lot, you know. And we contributed. My dog found a lot of explosive materials. And his name was Art, A-R-T. My dog Art, rest in peace. He died about a year after we got back from stomach cancer. Probably from the toxins and stuff from the burn pits, from being over there, because he was with me. And dogs, as you know, their lifespan's 7 years, so they're exposed to something, it's going to show quicker on them than it is on us, on a human. And now we have all these issues with the burn pits. There were burn pits everywhere. They were burning toxins, metal, and all kinds of waste, and all around where we lived, and we would breathe it in. It was everywhere. So I know I was exposed, and I know Art was. This dog comes home a year later. He's got a tumor in his stomach that's inoperable, and they have to put him down. He was given a burial, a full military burial with full honors on the USS Blue Ridge. Art, Canine Art. And that was my partner. That was my buddy. That was the first dog I lost. I call him a casualty because I believe, even though he didn't die in the war, when he came back, just like me, he wasn't the same. He wasn't the same. We saw, you know, you see too much. You see too much. You get exposed to too much. We would randomly just find dead bodies floating around, burnt. It's not like you see out here where there's a car accident or a car's on fire and the ambulance comes. There, that doesn't happen. The car will be on fire and the people will be burning in it, and there'll be a body burning in it. And if you're around there, you're going to smell it, you know. And you know what the smell is. Once you smell it, you'll never forget it. So that deployment was over, 7 months. I come back. A year or so later, I end up going back again as a part of the surge and do another tour. Same type of situation, very high op tempo. Hey, anytime you're looking for bombs, anytime you're doing something like that, you know that your next step could be your last. So you really got to have, you know, like I told people, before you step out there to do the job, unfortunately, you already have to come to grips with your own death going out there. Because if you go out there scared, because you're walking out there and there are real bombs out there. They'll rig dead animals, they'll rig dead bodies. If they hit a Humvee with an IED and kill a bunch of U.S. fellow service members, they'll go and booby trap the bodies, because they know the first thing we do, we see our brothers and sisters, we immediately run and try to rescue them. Well, boom. You know, they were doing shit like that. But you know, going out there, that any step, your next step could be your last. And you already got to make peace with your maker. You cannot do that without already making peace with your maker before you take one step out there. And I used to have to do it. I used to go through this routine. When I would get back from a mission, I would pray to God, and then before I went on the mission, I always knew my schedule, you know. I would always pray and just say, hey, if this is it, it's it, and that's it. I had to come to terms with it. I already have to, you know, to go out there. So you learn how to compartmentalize things, and you also learn how to stay calm in uncalm situations. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it, you know. So fast forward, I ended up finishing my career in the Navy. I spent over 2 decades in the Navy. I ended up getting out in 2012. Immediately after I got out, I saw that the United States Bureau of Prisons was hiring. They were hiring correctional officers. I figured this would be a nice fit for me. I could just roll out of this federal job, roll into from my retirement from the military, and then I could roll into another job and contribute more to your federal time and to your thrift savings plan and all kinds of stuff. And your military time counts towards your federal job, so it was like a perfect fit for me. So I applied for the job with the Bureau of Prisons as a correctional officer. And I remember I got out of the military, and 30 days later I was hired. I was there. And it was crazy because my whole life I had been visiting prisons as a visitor. And it was kind of like with my dad being in prison, my stepdad and my cousins, it was kind of like, I don't know, like, it was weird. It was like, I guess I was always destined to go to prison in some form or fashion. So maybe they were right. Maybe they were right. I did go to prison, just not like my dad. I went as an officer, not an inmate. So I remember talking to my dad. My dad eventually got out of prison. He got out. He was eventually able to get his sentence reduced. Instead of life without parole, he got life with parole, and he was able to get paroled out in 2008, right when I came back from my second deployment from Iraq. And I remember talking to him going, hey, I'm going to go work in the prison. And he just kind of laughed, you know. He was like, you know, well, you know what to do. Don't trust anybody. And, oh, everyone's always watching you. And, you know, he schooled me. And I remember getting hired. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to be a different kind of guy because of my experiences, because of my family situation. This is somebody's father, brother, son, grandfather. Treat everybody with respect. Just like I learned as a military policeman, treat everybody with respect. And I even taught that in the military. I taught verbal judo. I was an instructor of that. I was an instructor of self-defense. I was an instructor of handcuffing and searching. I was an instructor of firearms. So I had all these schools, this training record behind me from the military. So I remember saying in one portion of the, they call it when you first get hired, you go to this indoctrination, indoc they call it, where they introduce everybody and you're a new employee and all that. And I just remember standing up, they had everyone stand up, and I just told people, you know, my name is Rob Farlow, and if you're corrupt or something, I will report you. You know, I have zero tolerance for that. If you're a corrupt officer, don't work with me. I remember saying that on the first day. And some people go, well, why'd you say that? Because I know there are corrupt officers. You know, my father had corrupt officers. My stepfather had corrupt officers. And they told me there was officers that they would bribe, that would bring them in stuff. Well, I wasn't going to be a part of that. That's not me. See, I'm the different version of them. I'm the better version, okay? So I started my job out, and you know what? It was just, I took to it like a fish to water. I was doing really good at the job. They recognized me for my communication skills. They sent me to instructor school. Same thing like in the military. I went to self-defense instructor school, and I went to core communications school, which is basically teaching officers how to communicate to de-escalate. They recognized me and sent me to a school to be a de-escalation instructor, where I actually taught at the prison. During annual training, I taught self-defense and de-escalation communications. I would teach younger officers and things like that. And same thing I did in the military. And from that point, I was married. Everything was going great. I was making good money. I bought this nice house. And I was working at the Federal Penitentiary, USP Coleman. Now, it's actually a federal correctional complex. It's the largest federal correctional complex in the United States of America. It's in Central Florida. They have 2 penitentiaries, Pen 1, which is an active pen, Pen 2, which is more like a penitentiary, but it's more like for older guys and medical. It's like a medical penitentiary. So guys that are kind of, you know, not physically fit, not fit for full duty. They got some kind of ailment. It's like they call it a drop pen, an easy pen. Then we had a medium and we had a low, and then we had a female camp. So as an officer there, I got this work. I was assigned to Pen 1, but I got to work at all the different custody levels for overtime or sick and annual, which is really cool because I got to see all the custody levels. And I'm doing really good at my job. Everything's going well. Then all of a sudden my mother calls me and says, your brother's addicted to heroin. He's using heroin from the opioids, from the pills, from a car accident. He graduated from the pills to shoot himself up. He's stealing from me. I don't know what to do. And I remember thinking, I got this big house here. I'm making big money. That's my brother. Send him to me. Send him up here. I remember telling my brother, just get in your car and go. I'll take care of everything. I got you. I got a room. I had a big house. You got a room. Help me take care of my dogs. And I'm going to get you health insurance. We're going to get you into a rehab, get you treatment. Are you willing? Do you want to do this? And he said, yeah. And he came up, and that's what I did. I sent him to, a doctor. He got physical. He went to a shrink. They put him on some antidepressants. They gave him a treatment plan for methadone, all kinds of stuff. And they were trying to reduce him on the methadone dosages to eventually, be free of it. Well, while he was living with me, he was doing really well for a little while. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know, things started turning up missing in my house. My wife was getting concerned at the time. And I remember one morning I came home from work and our big screen television was gone. I woke him up and I said, hey, what's going on? Our TV's missing. He told me there was a break-in. He tried to, tell me that, oh, I think someone jimmied the door in here. And it was clearly an inside job. I mean, it didn't take Columbo to figure that out. And I remember I said to him, listen, get on your shorts. You obviously relapsed. Get your clothes on. Now, I didn't know, I find this out later, but I'm going to take you to the hospital. I want them to the emergency room. And I didn't tell him, but I was planning on Baker acting him, but I didn't tell him that. Maybe he kind of knew, but I didn't tell him that. And the next thing I know, he tells me, okay, I'm going to go and change and I'll be right out. I said, okay. And he walks in the room, and then the next thing you know, he says, I got to go smoke a cigarette outside in the backyard. And he goes outside, and then I hear boom. And my ex-wife is at the sink, and she's like, oh my God. And then I'm like, what? And then I run out, and my brother shot himself in the head. And he was laying there with the gun, still squeezing the trigger. I guess that's a normal thing if you learn at suicides. And I remember I just went out there and I held him to my chest. I plugged the hole, and I just thought, the gun was right over there, and I just thought, let me just take this gun and let me go with him. That way we both go together. I don't let him take this journey by himself. But then I thought of my mom, and I said, Jesus Christ, if I do that, my mom's just lost, my sister's gone, my brother's head, brains are in my hand. That's not necessarily a favorable outcome, but I still had faith. I yelled to my wife at the time, call 911, let's get him. I'm controlling the bleeding, all the first aid stuff I learned in the military. Combat first aid, direct pressure elevation, clear the airway. I'm doing everything by the fucking book. I just went into machine mode. And the ambulance came, they took him, and he expired shortly after that. Now my mom, unfortunately, she had to bury 2 children, and my brother was he was the love of my life. He was just like God's gift to me. That was their gift to me after my sister left, and now I'm just all alone, and I don't really care anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm drinking a bottle of vodka a day with Tito's. My marriage is done. Ooh, look at that. Hear that? My marriage was done. My wife was, at the time, she was just done with me. She ended up leaving me for another man, and I was drinking myself to death. We went through a divorce. It was you know, how divorces are with these lawyers. They're worse than the mafia, these divorce lawyers. They just want to, they know exactly how much money you both got, and they know exactly how much money they want to take from you. And they definitely need to rein those bastards in. So financially, I was raped. My wife was gone. My brother was gone. My sister was gone. Then my best cat that I got in Italy, I lived in Italy for 5 years too, by the way. He died. And it was just, I was in a bad spot. I didn't believe in suicide because, you know, I don't believe in that. So I thought maybe if someone did it for me, then it wouldn't be suicide, right? It's not me. If someone does it for me, then it's, you know. So I remember from that point, I was just a robot. I was showing up to work. I was, you know, the house was gone. I was living in a little apartment. I was self-medicating. You know, I'm still taking medicine for PTSD because I have PTSD, you know, that I have from my military service. I was still taking that medicine. You know, I'm drinking, and next thing I know, I have this bad eye infection, real bad. My eyes just started bleeding like it was crazy. They went from like being swollen to just like bleeding, like The Exorcist. And I remember thinking, what the hell's going on with me? So I went to the doctor, and they said, oh, it's pink eye, and they give me medicine. Doesn't go away. Makes it worse. Makes it even more irritated. I'm like literally, I wake up in the morning and I got blood on a towel. I leave it on a towel. It's fucking crazy. And I remember finally I go back to the doctor. He goes, oh my goodness, it's not. It's staph infection. It's not conjunctivitis. It's staph infection. So, okay. So he starts treating me for staph infection. He gives me some pills. Couple days later, a week later, I start getting severe back pains. Like bad, like someone's just sticking a sword in my back and just twisting it. You know, right in the middle of my back. And it's just immense pain. So I go and to the hospital again, and I get an x-ray at the VA. And they're like, nah, we don't see anything. You got degenerative disc disease, which I had from the military. I had some back issues that were documented in my records. So they're just thinking, hey, you're getting older. It's getting worse. You work out. You're very active. You work 40, 50 hours a week. And so I'm thinking, oh, my God. So they give me muscle relaxers. Now I'm taking the muscle relaxers and I'm drinking. And because I'm in so much pain, I can't move without drinking Tito's vodka or muscle relaxers. I can't move. Finally, one day I got home from work. I laid down in my bed. I woke up a couple hours later and I couldn't move. And I urinated myself. Couldn't move my legs. They were just dead. They were just dead. I was hitting them. Nothing. Nothing. I was pinching them. Nothing. So called 911. They come get me. They bring me to the hospital. While I'm in the hospital, I'm laying in the emergency room, and doctor sends me in for another x-ray. I just had an x-ray like 3 weeks earlier. He says, nothing, I don't know what it is. I have this feeling they think I'm bullshitting, like maybe I'm trying to like go out on disability from my federal job, like I'm lying. Like, you know, you come in there with back pain, they automatically, the way they came at me is it was kind of like maybe you're faking and you're trying to, you know. And I'm like, no, I'm not faking. This is real. I can't move, you know. And then I couldn't pee because my bladder was just, you know. They came in, they shoved a catheter in me. Now, if they shove a catheter in your dick and you don't feel it, there's something wrong. I didn't feel it. I thought it was going to be incredible pain. I watched it go in. I was like, no, please. I watched it, and it didn't. I didn't feel it. It felt good to drain my bladder, but I didn't feel the pain from it. I'm thinking, wow, you know. So finally there was this doctor, I had my Iraq War, I didn't wear it today, but I have an Iraq War bracelet from a fellow dog handler that died. And I usually wear it, and I was in the emergency room, and I remember I was sitting, and one of these doctors walks by. It was a young doctor. He had like, you know, he had like that Tom Cruise look. Like, you know, he was young, he was clean cut. And he had a little bit of a pilot, like Navy pilot swagger to him. They're kind of cocky, those guys. They have a swagger to them. And they should be. I mean, what they do, not many people could do. So he comes in, he sees my bracelet, and he's like, where were you? And I said, I was in Iraq twice, and da-da-da-da. He goes, well, I'm a Naval Reserve doctor. I'm Commander so-and-so. I just got back from a year in Afghanistan. I'm going to take care of you, brother. Send him in for an MRI. So he sends me for an MRI. I come back, I'm not even in the room. 15 minutes later, I could see him, he comes into the room and he's panic stricken on his face. Now I realize, oh shit, this is probably bad. I'm so fucking crazy that I'm thinking I had an allergic reaction to the pain pills and that they were just to the muscle relaxers, that they were probably just going to give me a shot, and in a couple hours I was going to walk out of there and go back home and watch fucking TV and finish my drink. Like, that's how fucking crazy I was. And he said, you got an abscess on your spine. I got to get you out of here. I got to call a helicopter. I got to get you out of here. You're going to lose everything from the waist up. You're going to lose that. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's why you're paralyzed. You got an abscess on your spine. That's why it paralyzed your legs, but it's only going to get bigger, and it's going to paralyze you even from the top, you know, from your chest up. I got to get you out of here. Now I'm like, oh shit, it got real. Now for the first time, I'm like, oh wow, this is serious. Next thing you know, they get me out of there. They take me. It's like a scene from ER. They pull me into an ambulance. They wheel me in. There's this team of doctors waiting for me with masks on. This is before COVID. And I remember this one little red-headed doctor. He was bald a little bit, but he had a red beard, and he looked like Richard Dreyfuss from Jaws. If you ever watched Jaws, the character that Richard Dreyfuss played in Jaws, that looked just like, was exactly his twin. And he looked at me, and he, with his thing on his head, and he pulled down, and I see the beard, and he's like, Mr. Farlow, you have an abscess on your spine. I have to cut you open. I have to clean it out. This has caused damage to your spinal cord. Permanent damage. You will never walk again. You will never walk again. You will be a paraplegic for the rest of your life. And I'm like, he can't be saying, like, I'm just trying to process what the other doctor told me about, holy shit, you got an now he's telling me this, and I'm like, it was just like, I can't believe this. I just had a back pain. What the fuck is going on? And from that point, I remember the lady, the anesthesiologist, looked at me. She goes, how much do you weigh? I said, as much as an elephant. Give me as much as an elephant, because I don't want to fucking wake up. Next thing I know, they push that medicine in the bag, and I'm asleep. I wake up the next morning, and I'm wrapped like a mummy. I got a tube in my throat, a tube in my penis, a tube in my ass, and everybody's surrounding me, and they're waiting for me, and I pop my eyes up open, and I'm looking, and even that doctor was there, the one that told me I couldn't walk, but I was never going to walk again. And I noticed him. I remembered his face. He was off to the right, and I couldn't move. I had a tube in him. I remember looking and seeing him. And I was waiting for him to come over to me and tell me that the operation was a success, and everything I said before in the emergency room, forget it. I fixed it. You're good. You'll recover right away like this. That's what I'm hoping he's going to say to me, this guy. Oh, by the way, this all happened on my birthday, too. This was my birthday, waking up. So he finally, I can't talk, but finally I'm hoping he's going to come over and tell me this was all, you know, a mistake, or that he saved me. And he didn't. He came over and he looked me in the eyes again, and he told me, yeah, you're never going to walk again. You know, we're going to get you into you're going to stay in intensive care for a couple days. I'm going to wait a day, then I'll remove the tube from your mouth. And it was nothing encouraging. So I remember thinking, looking up to God, going, you motherfucker. You take everything from me, my wife, my sister, my brother, my house, my brand new Nissan truck, Titan, brand new. I had a Jeep four-door Cherokee. You take all this from me and you leave the job half done. Why didn't you just kill me? Like, you motherfucker. And I just cursed him out. I remember I just cursed God out. I totally had no respect. I told him everything I felt about him, everything about how there's starving kids in the world and he's responsible. And when eventually I go, me and him are gonna have a fucking conversation, and I don't give a fuck what he does to me. And I don't care where he sends me, as long as he sends me where my brother is. I don't give a fuck if it's in hell, heaven, or wherever. Timbuktu. As long as my brother's there, and I don't give a fuck about him and his bullshit and all this. And I was just cursing him out. We were having it was like me yelling at my father, and my father just sitting there and listening like, okay, all right, are you done? You got any more? And I'm just, I just, it was like that. And I finally just went to sleep. I was so exhausted and done. I spent 3 months in a hospital. The whole time I was there, I was having some of the nurses' aides like smuggle me in alcohol. Everything I learned in prison, how to get contraband in, I got it there, I was cash apping these girls. They were all cool. They brought me in some vodka. They brought me in like cheeseburgers and shit and stuff I wasn't supposed to eat, and where I was. So I was like living like what they used to say in the pen. They'd say I was living penitentiary rich in the hospital, because I knew how to get stuff. And I would tell the girl, like, when you get off, all right, when you come back, bring me this, bring me a little pizza, and they would smuggle it in, bring me some alcohol, bring me this, and I had all this. And I remember doing that, and I was just thinking, let me just kill myself. I was hoping, I was trying to devise a plan. I was I remember asking people to like bring in something so I can kill myself with it. I was just, joking halfly, but I was seeing if, hey, can you bring a gun in and let me shoot my, just stuff like that to see if they were with it, And I just remember eventually I got home and they sent me, and I had round the clock care. I had nursing care. I had everything. I was in a wheelchair. I went to therapy and I just completely blew them off, because I just figured I was never going to walk again. Fuck them. I don't need them and whatever. Nobody wanted to come near me. And I remember I was in so much pain. I have so much nerve pain. And they were giving me whatever the pain pills I wanted. It was like whatever I wanted. I'm paralyzed. I got a tube in me. I wear a diaper. I was this big, strong, tough guy. Now I wear a diaper. I shit myself, I got my dick don't work. I got a tube in it, who fucking cares? You don't give a fuck about life living like that. And I remember one day I wouldn't allow anybody to come see me, because I'd rather have your envy than your pity. I don't want your pity. And I remember one of my longtime friends, he snuck in. He said, I'm going to come see you. He wouldn't leave, and they finally had to let him in. And I didn't even take visits from my mom and stuff while I was in this isolation, because I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want no one to see me. And finally, he got his way in, and we were talking, and he said, I brought you something. And I was like, what did you bring me? And he showed me a joint, rolled up joint. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you bringing drugs into my house for, bro? Well, meanwhile, I got all the pain pills right here I want. I'm like, bro, that's drugs, man. Get that out of here. I don't want that in my house, right? He's like, what else do you got to lose, Robert? So I thought about it, and he left, and then I said, give me a lighter. And I got a lighter, and I lit it up. Now this is a vape. And from that point forward, it didn't heal me like, oh my God, but it allowed my mind mentally to actually have positive thoughts. It made me upbeat. after a couple puffs, I'm kind of like, I'm smiling. I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing about my situation. I'm like, oh, you know. But I'm watching TV, and for the first time, I had a little bit of an escape, a mental escape. And I'm thinking, oh man, this stuff is really good. I mean, I feel good. And then I said, get me more. And I started getting more. And I started getting more illegally at first, because I didn't have a prescription at that time. And next thing I know, I started thinking, wow, why are they arresting people for this? There was actually people in my prison doing like life for cannabis. Like this stuff is like healing. Like I feel good on this. I actually feel positive. I have a positive thought. To the point where now I was thinking, Jesus, why don't I get out there and do my own rehab, and I could beat this. I could beat this. Fuck. And I remember going to, I would get a whole bunch of, I would smoke a bunch of cannabis, and I would get high, and I would go to therapy then, and I'd say to them, I want to do it my way. Because in therapy, all they want to do is show me how to go from my wheelchair to the toilet to the bed to the thing, wipe your ass, go here in the shower. I'm like, I already know how to do all that shit. I'll come to therapy, but you're only going to teach me how to live my life without this chair. You're not going to teach me anything about how to live my life in this chair, because I already got that. I want to get up. I want to walk again. So they said, fine, we'll do it your way first. If it don't work, then we'll do it our way. I said, fine, that's a deal. And I remember going in there immediately. They wanted me to do, I said, no, put me in the water, put me in the tank. And they put me in this lever, dump me in the water, in this tank, and literally I'm just hanging there, my legs, and I wouldn't give a fuck. I'd have a vape in there. By this time, I got a medical card, so I'd have a little vape in there, and I'd smoke when no one was watching, and I would get in the water, and I would try to massage my legs. I would try to, put them on the ground. I would try to do exercises even though they weren't moving, but I was making an effort. I was making an effort. When I got home, every night, I would roll out from the bed onto the floor. I would stretch myself. Legs couldn't work, but I was still stretching myself. They were like just big dead weight logs, and I was stretching them. And I was touching my toes, and I was doing these things. I was doing sit-ups. I was doing push-ups, even though I couldn't. I was getting to my knees and starting to work out, because I was getting high and I was feeling good. I started learning the difference between an indica and a sativa. A sativa during the day, an indica at night, so I could rest and go to sleep. And I was treating people better. I was thinking better. My thoughts were positive. And I realized the whole fucking war on drugs was bullshit. The war on cannabis is bullshit. And I read about it and researched it and why it all came about. So while I'm doing all this and I'm studying about the different sativa and the indica, the hybrid and the RSO oils and all this stuff, and I'm learning the cannabinoid systems, and I'm learning how to pick my marijuana to tailor my day and my back spasms and things like that, to the point where I got rid of all those pain pills. Done. I stopped drinking. I haven't drank in over 3 years. I'm laying down in bed and I'm watching TV, and this was going on about 8 months. I had no movement, and I was really putting effort. And I was going, and I refused to pray to God. I said, I'm not going to ask you for anything. No more. I'm not going to come a begging. You did all this to me. If you think I'm going to come begging on my hands and knees to you, buddy, you got another thing coming. Because I don't beg for nothing. I'm not living on my knees. And I remember saying that. Well, but then I would think to myself, I would hear about the COVID and people were dying in New York. And I thought to myself, well, I won't pray for myself, but I'll pray for them. I'll pray for them. But I won't mention myself. I don't want your mercy. I don't want anything. You did enough. You did enough. You ruined my life enough. Get away from me. But I'll pray for the people that are dying over there in COVID. And I started doing that. Next thing I know, out of nowhere, I'm watching television, and I was having one of my fits again. I started to get now, I'm feeling sorry for myself again. Oh, you know, I'm laying in bed, I get comfortable, then I have to go poop, and then I poop myself, and then I'm like, you know, I smell like you're like a baby again, you know? Oh, I gotta be changed, you know, I smell it. And I remember I was having one of my fits, and I was angry, and I started, you know, I'm like, all right, let me smoke a little bit, and next thing I know, I'm watching TV, and I'm looking down at my feet, and I would always talk to my legs, move feet, move toes, move calves, move legs, move whatever. I would try to talk to it, talk to it, talk to it, but it was like it wouldn't listen. Well, out of nowhere, my left big toe started going like this. I thought for a second, is that me or is it a spasm? Because I have spasms, because I have nerve damage. But they're uncontrolled. I don't control the spasms. They just go like that. Then I realized it was me. I was controlling that toe. And I remember calling everybody in. My girlfriend at the time, everybody in, they were all crying when they saw that. They were like, I couldn't believe it. I called my mom. I said, I got some movement. Because they would ask me every day almost for a year, has anything moved yet? I'm like, no. And then I started telling them, stop asking. Stop asking. You know? It's not supposed to move anyway. Nothing's supposed to move. Long story short, that toe, it started catching on like wildfire, baby. From the toe to the calf to the butt cheek to the knee, and the next thing I know, I got my leg. I'm moving now. Not very. I mean, not much, but I'm getting movement. My feet. I mean, little bits like this. Starting to be able to move the toes, and things are starting to come back. And now I hit the ground hard. I start working out even harder. I go to the pool. Excuse me. At my own place. And I'm wheeling up there, and people were looking at me like, look at this guy, he's like Rocky, he's wheeling, going to the pool. And I would go to the edge of the pool, and I would just throw myself in the water like I was gonna drown myself. And I would get in the pool, and I would practice in the little end, doing squats and putting one foot in front of the other, the choreography and the technique of trying to walk and hanging on the edges and doing like squats and swimming and trying to swim and get my legs alive again. And things just started coming back, man. And as the real estate came back, I paid a price for the real estate because the pain came back stronger. Because, you know, I'm feeling now all the nerves are damaged. Still wouldn't take a damn pain pill. Still doing cannabis. And long story short, 3.5 years, here I am. I walk with a cane. You wouldn't want to go with me to the mall because I'm slow. But I went from a wheelchair to a walker to a cane. And I work out every day. I go to the, not every day, 3 days a week. I do weightlifting. I swim in the pool. That's how I get my cardio because I can't run. I could do pull-ups just for myself. I build my body back and my diet. I don't drink. Cannabis. This saved my life. And I'm a veteran. And I have a shirt on. 22 veterans a day die from suicide. Why isn't the VA giving us cannabis? Why? Why are people still getting locked up for this? Why? Why are we still doing this to our people? We have alcohol, tobacco, and doctors were giving people pain pills a few years ago, like my brother, giving them away like TikToks. Nobody went to jail, but they'll put a drug dealer in jail. They'll put someone in jail, give them a permanent criminal record for this. This is medicine, 100%. Compared to tobacco that kills 500,000 people, alcohol, 500,000 people a year, and you're afraid of cannabis? This stuff right here with the hemp and how it could produce textiles and rope, clean energy, biodegradable plastic that you could drink a bottle, like a bottle of water made out of hemp, the biodegradable plastic. They do something with the fibers. You throw it away, the bottle will dissolve into the earth within 10 years or so. This is the stuff I'm reading. I'm learning about the different cannabinoids and the different things. And, you know, I've went to a cannabis college. And a lot of people don't want me on their shows because they're like, your story is remarkable, Rob, but you're pushing a message of drug. Really, you're worried about cannabis? Your kids seeing me do cannabis? What about when you drink and smoke in front of kids? I'm thinking, what are you guys? People need to come out. And then I bump into people that tell me, I have a vape and I have kids, and when I get them to bed finally, I have to go in the closet at night and smoke it. Because they're afraid. They don't want they think all of a sudden, all the stuff they told you about this is wrong. It's all propaganda. It should be legal. Nobody should be in prison for this. Nobody. Prohibition don't work in the first place. We know that. But cannabis? No. I came up with the idea of the Stone Sailor, which is the company, and my YouTube page, The Stone Sailor. I talk about criminal justice reform, ending the drug war. I want to get people who've been convicted of cannabis crimes, I want their records expunged or pardoned, and I want the VA to start paying veterans like me for their cannabis. I have to buy this. The VA's promised me full medical care. Well, this is prescribed, and they should be paying for it. Me and everybody else. I know a lot of other vets, cannabis saved their life, but the VA won't give it. Oh, that's a Schedule I drug. Really? You have this up there with heroin? You're saying there's no medical use for this? Bullshit. It's time we end the war on drugs. And we need to end the war on cannabis and psilocybin too. Remarkable studies. This is helping people withdraw from opioids, cannabis. It's a fact. It ain't no joke. So I'm the Stone Sailor, and that's my story. Please check out my YouTube page, The Stone Sailor, and God bless.